Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Reviving Veterinary Medicine webinar. We're so glad that you could be with us this evening or this morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. It is always great to gather and get to go through some information pertinent to well-being in our amazing profession. Great to see all of you here. And again, also those of you who might be watching the recording. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that Reviving Veterinary Medicine is sponsoring this event, and we appreciate Reviving Veterinary Medicine's commitment to advancing veterinary well-being and supporting our community. A quick reminder that this webinar is approved for 1 hour of CE credit by the Alberta Veterinary Medical Association. So please be sure to stay with us for the entirety of this session to be available or eligible, I should say, for your CE credit. And at the end of the webinar, we will just remind you about how you will get your CE certificate. As we get started, just a few housekeeping items. You're welcome to ask questions using the chat feature or the Q&A box, and we will have dedicated time at the end to address those questions. I have Jamie on with me, my incredible assistant. If you experience any technical difficulties, please reach out to Jamie in the chat. Jamie will also be monitoring the chat and the Q&A for any questions or concerns to share. I am Dr. Marie Hollowaychuk, and I will be your speaker for today and the moderator for today's session. And I'm very excited to speak to you today about habits and how we can create strategies for habit formation, or how we can use strategies for habit formation to cultivate some tools to help us prevent burnout. So I'm going to be going through our webinar slides for today, talking through these concepts, welcoming your questions, of course, in the Q&A or the chat. And then very briefly at the end, I will be touching on some additional Reviving Veterinary Medicine resources, including our upcoming program From Burnout to Balance. So with that said, we will go ahead and get into this content. So for those of you who might not know me, I am a second generation veterinarian. Both of my parents are veterinarians. They're both retired. One worked in companion animal practice and owned their practice for more than 40 years. The other was in regulatory medicine. I became a small animal emergency and critical care boarded specialist in 2008, and I have been practicing as a criticalist and ER doctor since that time. Although my focus over the last 10 years or so has been on mental health and well-being advocacy. So I am a wellness, leadership, and communication coach by training. I'm also a keynote speaker and a recent author of the book, A Compassionate Calling: What It Really Means to Be a Veterinarian. I'm also a very proud mom to my 5-year-old daughter, and we also own a 7-year-old standard poodle pictured with me here the day that my books arrived in the mail. So, why do habits matter? Well, of course, it's January and mid-January, and we often are faced with this notion of, do we create resolutions for the year? When a new year is upon us, do we take the time to set resolutions in the hope that we can make some meaningful changes in our lives? And the reason why we're focusing on habits and not resolutions in today's webinar is because the statistics really show that short-term resolutions rarely last. Most of us, when we make a New Year's resolution, those are out of the window very soon into the new year. And what we found is that instead, small daily actions or habits are what really have the biggest impact on our long-term well-being, whether it's our energy, our focus, or even our resilience, that is our ability to bounce back from hardship. Science actually shows that habits drive nearly half of our daily behaviors. So I think this is often why we feel like the days just fly by, because remember, we do habits without even thinking of them. So when we are spending much of our day doing things that are just habit to us, we're not even thinking about those things. And that can be good if we've got a lot of healthy habits in our lives, or that can be detrimental if a lot of our habits are negative and not health promoting. So why do most New Year's resolutions fail? Well, the statistics show again that by February, 80% of people's New Year's resolutions will have gone out the window. Only 8 to 12% of people actually achieve long-term behavior change when they set New Year's resolutions. So it's not to say that it's not worth doing. It's just to say that if you do succeed, you are one of the lucky ones. And the reasons for that are that unfortunately, very often people, when they set New Year's resolutions, the goals are often very vague, or they haven't set resolutions. Or they haven't set goals, I should say. They've just made a resolution to lose weight or, quit smoking or, eat more healthy, but they're not those specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound smart goals that we really want to strive for. Because of that, again, we proclaim these New Year's resolutions, but there's not a lot of planning. There's not a lot of strategy in terms of how this is going to happen, which ultimately means that these are unrealistic expectations. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to do this next year. It's definitely something that needs to be strategized and thoughtfully planned, which is why we really want to hone in on the habits that we want to create rather than just, again, proclaiming these large, grand New Year's resolutions. So, in our time together today, I'm going to share with you some habit principles that will help prevent burnout and create lasting change. We're going to talk about how to replace unhelpful or unhealthy habits with energy boosting alternatives, how we can apply behavioral science to sustain healthy habits. So again, there's a lot of research behind this to show why habits are really helpful. And I'm going to share with you how you can build a personalized burnout prevention plan for yourself. So we'll talk about some stepwise strategies for building your own plan. So, how are habits formed? Well, if any of you have read James Clear's book on habit formation or anybody else, there's some amazing habit books out there. My favorite actually being Gretchen Rubin's Better Than Before book. Habits are formed based on a habit loop. So, this is a reinforcing loop. And this repetition in this loop that goes around and around and is self-reinforcing is what creates those neural pathways that make this behavior automatic or innate, meaning you don't even have to think about it. You don't even have to access your prefrontal cortex to make it happen. And so what happens is it always begins with some sort of a cue, right? Maybe it's a hunger cue or a boredom cue or a loneliness cue or something, right? That then gets linked to a habit that you choose to do, right? A routine. So that might be, you get bored at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the clinic, and the routine becomes to go to the break room and grab an unhealthy snack. Well, what is the reward there? Well, you get a dopamine hit. If you're eating sugar, it's going to feel good in the moment. And that reinforces this, oh, when I feel bored or anxious or lonely or tired, and I do this routine, that feels this way, and therefore I'm going to keep doing that over and over and over. And the research is a little bit unclear in terms of exactly how long it takes for a habit to be set into our neural pathways. There's some research to suggest it only takes 2 or 3 weeks of doing this on a daily basis. There's other research that suggests it can take as long as 3 months. So I think honestly, I'm not a behavioral psychologist by any stretch, but I can imagine that it depends on how rewarding that habit is, right? And we've all faced this when we're trying to establish a habit or routine that is maybe not immediately rewarding. And James Clear talks about this a lot in his book, that it's harder to see the long-term benefits. It's harder to stick with it, right? So we think of a lot of healthy habits like exercise as having compound interest. You have to do them for a long period of time, just like you have to invest money, small amounts, and let it sit for a long period of time to really see that interest or that reward build over time. And so I think in some ways, whereas we have unhealthy habits like checking our phone or scrolling social media give us that immediate dopamine hit, for a lot of other healthy routines. I mean, let's be honest, nobody's getting a dopamine hit from eating vegetables, right? Or eating a healthy meal. Some of us do get that, that high when we exercise, but nevertheless, not quite the same thing as when we, engage in some other unhealthy habits. So let's talk a little bit about burnout and how these healthy habits relate. So the World Health Organization definition of, not of definition, sorry, I've gotten the wrong word there, definition of burnout, it's supposed to say, is that it is a syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress that is not successfully managed. And there are a lot of different things that we can see when burnout shows up in our lives. And most scoring systems for burnout will characterize one of these three symptoms. Now, some individuals might just have one symptom, some might have all three. And if you find yourself having all three, you are in what we would consider the more longer stages or more severe stages of burnout. Burnout really is something that can kind of creep up over time. And so again, initially it might only be one of these symptoms, and then it might be, it might culminate in all three. One of those symptoms is emotional exhaustion. And this is definitely one of the most obvious that we see in vet medicine, where we just start to feel emotionally overextended by our work. We're exhausted, especially when it comes to emotionally demanding situations with our clients or with our team members. We can also feel a sense of cynicism, or depersonalization is the scientific research-based term, where we just start to feel a little bit nonchalant or impersonal when it comes to our clients, our patients, or our team. Okay. And then finally, we can also experience a reduced sense of personal accomplishment. And this can manifest in one of two ways. Either we just feel like we're spinning our wheels, we're totally incompetent, we're not getting anything done, or we're doing our job. We're helping other patients, but it doesn't feel like enough. It doesn't feel meaningful. It doesn't feel purposeful. It doesn't feel like we're really accomplishing anything. So I mentioned scoring systems that are used to calculate burnout, and one of those is the Maslach burnout inventory. And so when we look at this scoring system and we look at emotional exhaustion, one of the statements that you will see is that I feel emotionally drained from my work. When it comes to cynicism, it's, I don't really care what happens to some patients. And for low personal accomplishment, one of the statements in this assessment is, I haven't really accomplished many worthwhile things on the job. So these are the different sentiments that we can see within the scoring system. And again, I can't reveal all of the statements that are within the scoring system because it is proprietary, but those are just a little bit of a snippet of the three main categories that we can experience. So there's many different factors that are related to burnout. And I want to be clear that while today's presentation is really focused on the individual or personal things that you have control over, there are many work-related factors, or what we refer to as organizational factors, that are linked with burnout. One of those is a lack of control, right? So we can feel like we don't have any control over the work that we are doing. So we can feel, for example, if you work in the ER and you've got just case after case after case coming in, or you're in general practice and you're getting walk-ins and drop-offs all the time, that can lead to burnout. A demanding workload, whether it's really short appointment scheduling or a lot of callbacks and other tasks on your plate, not feeling recognized or rewarded for the work that you're doing, having unclear expectations, like not good job expectations, or job description from your management or your ownership, having toxicity in the workplace, dealing with interpersonal conflict is well documented in vet medicine, and values incongruence. So this is where something that you really value, perhaps it's, perhaps it's high touch points with your clients. If you are working in a practice where there's a lot of focus on production or seeing as many cases as possible, and you don't get to have those high touch points, that's going to feel like a values incongruence. And then, of course, insufficient resources. So if you're working in a practice where there's not enough computers, you don't have enough staff, your internet is very slow, whatever it might be, that is going to play into that as well. So, what we know based on the veterinary research and various studies that have been published is that those individuals who are most susceptible to burnout have workplace factors like high educational debt, lower income, spending a lot of their time working with dogs or cats, so companion animal practitioners seem more predisposed. They work in a toxic environment, or they are members of the support team, whether those are vet techs and nurses or other support team members. On the flip side, those who are least susceptible have a lower educational debt, a higher annual income. They spend most of their time working with food animals, and they work in a healthy culture that's characterized by this sense of belonging, trust, open communication, and sufficient time to deliver high quality patient care. Now, there are a lot of personal factors I mentioned as well that are linked with burnout. These include working long hours, having multiple jobs, having off shift responsibilities, whether that's caring for, parents or children or pets or other responsibilities. Having an absence of work life separation where individuals are feeling like they're constantly thinking about work and doing work even outside of working hours, not taking time off, not having a good social support system or even work related support system, and not engaging in self care. So, all of these things are those which contribute. And I mentioned that burnout is something that is really insidious over time. It can start with one symptom, and it's a very maybe barely noticeable symptom, and and it can build into multiple symptoms and very severe symptoms over time. There's also a stage, when it comes to starting a new job, we're in the honeymoon phase of the job. We love the job, we love the work that we're doing. Then we start to have that regular stress that's inherent in any job. When that stress becomes chronic and it's not managed well, that is what can then push us over into burnout. And if that burnout becomes entrenched, it will feel habitual, meaning it can be very, very difficult to find a way out of it without taking time off of work and without having structured support, typically from a mental health professional, plus or minus a coach. So, this is really where we want to focus on establishing healthy habits and preventing that onset of stress and chronic stress from moving into burnout. So I want to share with you now, there's many, many, many strategies that have been documented in the veterinary literature and the human literature that help reduce burnout. I'm going to focus on just five for today's presentation. These are all evidence-based, and they include limiting perfectionism, practicing mindfulness, prioritizing self-care, cultivating that work life separation, and nurturing non work hobbies like exercise, travel, and spending time with family and friends. So, to dig a little bit into the literature, when it comes to perfectionism, we know based on research out of Australia that veterinarians who exhibit perfectionism are more prone to distress during triggering ethically stressful events. So, for example, it's a animal that you want to send to a specialist, and the owner says, we're not going to pursue specialty care. That is a triggering, stressful event. And for those veterinarians who identify as perfectionists, that will incite more distress than those who are not. We also know in human healthcare professionals that burnout is predicted by perfectionism. So again, that probably leads to staying after work to go over and over and over your medical records or various other things that you might be doing as somebody who exhibits perfectionism that contributes to that cascade of events, that lack of work-life separation, that exhaustion, that overwhelm, that workload piling up, and so on and so forth. So what can we do? What habits can we establish? Well, number one, we have to set realistic standards for ourselves. This means not comparing ourselves to others, especially when it comes to social media. Setting these realistic standards, like setting a goal of time that we're going to spend on our medical records, or committing to changing our mindset when it comes to how we think about our work as veterinary professionals, are all going to be helpful. And so we want to make sure that we're avoiding negative thought patterns, black and white thinking. For example, anything less than perfect is failure, or catastrophizing. If I make a mistake, my career is over. Or probability overestimation. My clients won't trust me if I don't have all the answers. All of these things are very highly linked with very commonly seen with perfectionism, which I mentioned is very highly linked with burnout. So we want to work with a mental health professional to identify those negative thought patterns and work strategically to reconfigure those. So this is what is often termed as cognitive behavioral therapy, where we look at those thought patterns, we assess them, is this really true? Where did this come from? Why do I think this way? And then find a way to change those thought patterns, because those thoughts are what inform those perfectionistic behaviors. People with perfectionism, especially self-oriented perfectionism aimed at ourselves, also tend to be very self-critical. And so again, noticing that negative self-talk, that self-criticism, you're such an idiot. Why did you do that? I can't believe that happened. You've got to do better. We want to make a habit of replacing those, first identifying them, thinking about how we want to talk to ourselves instead. And then once we've stopped that negative self-talk, we want to replace it with more positive statements like nobody is perfect or everybody has a bad day sometimes. When it comes to mindfulness, so this is the second strategy. There's a lot of research looking at the benefits of mindfulness when it comes to burnout. And it probably is a situation whereby mindfulness, this ability to focus on our immediate experience, our present state of being, is probably what opens up our eyes to the fact that we are experiencing burnout and that we then need to take steps to make a change. Because what we know is that mindfulness is very heavily linked as well with self-compassion and self-care. So recognizing how we're talking to ourselves, noticing how we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're doing, then create that awareness, then creates that action towards taking care of ourselves, changing the way we talk to ourselves, and so on. And again, this has been shown in human healthcare studies. We know that a mindfulness practice is going to reduce burnout symptoms in the long term. So there's many mindfulness techniques out there. Anything that you can do to tune into your senses, to tune into your body, to recognize what your experience is in the present moment is going to be helpful. And so that might mean doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise where you simply stop and notice 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can smell, 2 things that you can touch, and 1 thing that you can taste. So tuning into your senses and just noticing. When we are tuned into our senses, that grounds us in the present moment and that gets us out of that rumination or future projection, those actions and behaviors that create anxiety and depression. A body scan is just stopping to notice, how am I feeling in my body? Am I, clenching my jaw? Are my shoulders up here? Is there tightness in my chest? Whatever that might be. And then mindful breathing. So noticing your breath, extending your exhales, expanding your belly, doing breathing that is going to really activate your parasympathetic nervous system and really just bring you back to the present moment. When you notice your breath, you're not going to be again focusing on anything else in that moment. Those are a little bit more informal mindfulness practices, things that you can just kind of do on the fly in practice. There's also a lot of research to demonstrate that a formal practice that you do for a set period of time, every single day or as often as you can, again, establishing that habit can really create those neural pathways that strengthen your ability to be present, not in a state of projection or rumination. So these are mind-body activities like yoga is one, Tai Chi, Qigong, and of course, meditation. And if you're looking for some veterinary specific meditations, if you go to Insight Timer and you search my name, There are veterinary specific meditations that I've recorded that you can use to, again, nurture this mindfulness practice. Many other meditations as well on Insight Timer. And of course, Headspace and Calm are also wonderful apps. For some of you who work at corporate owned practices, you will have free access to some of these apps that otherwise charge a membership fee as well. So the next thing that I mentioned as far as strategies goes is to prioritize self-care. And self-care is the self-initiated behavior that people choose to incorporate with the intention of promoting their health. So let's be clear, self-care is not always easy. It's not always enjoyable, but self-care is meant to be health promoting. We want to make sure that we are discerning or differentiating self-care from coping strategies. So self-care is a long-term plan that we use to build up our reserves so that when we have a bad day, when we get sick, when we've got a client that yells at us, we can manage that. We can bounce back more quickly rather than, dissolving into a puddle on the ground. Coping strategies, on the other hand, are short-term methods of dealing with difficulty or stress. These are what I refer to as good short-term strategies in the time of crisis, right? If you get home after a 14-hour shift and you have zero energy for anything, of course, I'm not going to expect that you're going to go to the gym and exercise or do some of these other things that take energy if you haven't been building up those reserves. Okay. So short-term strategies every once in a while are okay. We just don't want to only be focusing on short-term coping strategies like pouring a glass of wine, watching Netflix, staying up late, scrolling through Instagram. It's okay to do these sort of numbing, distracting things from time to time, but that is not the same thing as self-care. Okay. When we think about self-care, we want to think about a holistic approach. So it's also not just about exercise, eating healthy, and getting enough sleep. That's great for physical self-care. We also want to think of emotional self-care. So perhaps going to see a therapist, spiritual self-care, social, environmental, financial, work-related, all of these different things that are really going to help us to stay healthy and to nurture our well-being, which again, at the end of the day, is going to help buffer us against burnout as well. So a few self-care strategies in each of the 8 dimensions would be taking time off to recover from illness or injury. There's a wicked flu and other respiratory bugs going around. I had 2 over the holidays. So part of physical self-care is taking time off to actually take care of yourself, allow yourself to heal. Spiritual could be writing in a gratitude journal, maybe again every day to establish that habit. Emotional self-care, again, I mentioned seeing a mental health professional. Intellectual could be learning. Maybe you listen to a podcast on something that really interests you. Maybe it's veterinary related, maybe not. Financial could be meeting with a financial planner before the end of January to plan your budget or to talk about your tax return or whatever it might be. Again, it doesn't at all seem like fun, but it is going to help your self-care in your well-being in the long term. Social self-care, very important in today's lonely age. Despite social media, most of us are feeling more lonely than we ever have. So planning a weekly connection with a friend or a family member. Work related, maybe you commit to take at least one break. For those of you that work at your computers and work through your lunch hours, maybe you even commit to just 10 minutes away from the computer. And environmental self-care, again, tidying up clutter from your workspace or your home. There's a lot of research to demonstrate that outer order really does create inner calm. And so recognizing if your environment is having an impact on your well-being, what can you do to circumvent that? So another strategy that I shared, of course, is the strategy of work-life separation. And this is really borne out in the human healthcare literature, where it is emphasized that people need time off. They need time that they can completely disconnect from their work-related activities and fully embrace their life outside of work. And this means that we end our shifts and our work days in a very intentional way. We're not just bustling about our days and going home and then finishing records and then checking email and then going to bed and we're still thinking about work. We want to have closure to the days. We want to make sure at the end of our shift, have you done everything you need to do that day? Have you finished your documentation? Is there anything outstanding that needs to be done? If it has to be done, get it done or delegate it to somebody. Or if it's not so time crucial, maybe you write it down and you do it the next day. Okay, so really important to have a strategy for that. And then you want to have some sort of acknowledgement of the day, some sort of debrief, a personal debrief and integration and a closure. What went well? What are things that maybe you wish you had done better or that you didn't get to that day? Can you focus more on the positives and find something to be grateful for? And at the end of the day, can you sit in a space of recognizing, you know what, I did the best I could today with the time, energy, and resources that were available to me? And that's the most that anybody can ask of themselves on a daily basis. If there is anything that happened to you that was distressing or is bothering you, it's staying on your mind, can you find somebody to talk through it with, or at the very least, arrange to talk to somebody at another time? Maybe you fire off a text or an email to a coworker, a colleague, a classmate, somebody who you know that you could talk to. And this is where having the names of people that you trust, that you know that you could call upon to debrief something is going to be really helpful when those challenging days and shifts do arise. And then you want to have some sort of routine or ritual that really triggers to your mind and body that you are done work, right? Whether it's closing your email and shutting off, like actually powering down your computer, taking off your work clothes, your scrubs, your ID badge, your name tag, whatever it is, saying your goodbyes. That's a big way to have closure as well, rather than just sneaking out the back door. Some sort of ritual to recognize that your work is done. And maybe that's the commute home where you sort of decompress and you process. And then when you get home, it's complete. Now, the final strategy that I want to share with you before we dig into some of these habits and how we can actually cultivate them is nurturing non-work hobbies. We know based on the research out of the Merck Animal Health Wellbeing studies that burnout is reduced among veterinarians who spend time with family, who socialize with friends, who have a hobby, who exercise regularly, and who engage with a financial planner. These are all incredible self-care strategies. So how do we make sure that we can engage with these? Because at the end of the day, none of these things are news to us, right? I'm not probably sharing anything with you that is earth-shattering. You know the benefits of mindfulness and self-care and mitigating perfectionism and a lot of these things. So why at the end of the day, when we know these things will help us, is it so hard to make those healthy decisions, right? You get home and you're exhausted and you're thinking, oh, what am I going to have for dinner? And inevitably, if it's not a healthy habit, you're going to reach for the unhealthy choice. And that is, of course, because as human beings, we all experience what is referred to as decision fatigue, especially as high functioning, high decision making individuals where we're constantly having to weigh histories and exams and diagnostic test results and make diagnoses and make recommendations and work through treatment plans. We will have a reduction in our decision-making power over the course of the day because of overuse. This has nothing to do with how physically tired that you might be, but everything to do with your mental workload. And so this is one of those situations, again, where you sit down and not watch Netflix at the end of the night and you're like, I don't even know what to watch, right? Or I can't decide what to eat. It's that decision paralysis where we resort to making impulsive decisions. Or if we're still working in practice, we make mistakes, right? Or we just lose self-control. All day we've been avoiding the box of donuts in the break room. And when it gets to the end of the day and we're exhausted and our willpower is done, we're reaching for the donuts, okay? So habits eliminate that need for self-control. Habits are the key to sustaining healthy strategies because you don't have to make decisions. You don't have to think about it. Just like you don't have to think about brushing your teeth in the morning, you can create habits so that you don't have to think about practicing meditation or exercising or doing other things that we know are going to be helpful for our mental health and well-being over the long term. So, what are some habit forming strategies? And I can't stress it enough. I know that Jamie wrote it in the chat. The book Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin is one of my absolute favorites. She is one of my favorite authors. She has a great mix of stories and research and just is really put together in a really tangible way. And these strategies that I'm going to share with you now, many of them come from her book. And one of those is to put it in your calendar. Gretchen often uses the phrase, something that can happen at any time often happens at no time, right? When we talk about, I'm going to start exercising next week, what does that even look like? When is that even happening? If it's not in your calendar, it's like getting together with a friend. Let's get together. Until it's in the calendar, you're not getting together. There's nothing happening. It's the same thing as our healthy habits. The other thing that can be very helpful is accountability. Having an accountability partner, whether that's a coach, a mental health provider, a loved one, a family member, a friend, a gym buddy, whatever you can do to find somebody, ideally, who engages with it with you, or something to hold you accountable. Maybe it's your future self. Maybe it's a goal that you have, something to hold you accountable. Majority of veterinary professionals need external accountability. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to do this. They need someone or something else holding them accountable. Determining the smallest first step. So maybe you do, for example, have the goal to practice yoga twice a week this year. Okay, you want to build that mindfulness muscle, and that feels like a reasonable, attainable goal. What is the smallest first thing that you need to do to bring you towards that goal of practicing yoga twice a week? Well, maybe it's investigating options. Is there an app that you want to use, or a YouTube channel? Or do you want to go to a studio in person? It might be just a Google search, at home versus in studio yoga practice. Or maybe you know that you want to practice in person. And so the first smallest best step is Googling yoga studios near me. And maybe it's near work, maybe it's near home, right? But you're doing that. What is that first step that I can take? The first step is often the hardest step. So make it as little and easy as possible. Not the buying the yoga clothes and getting the mat and how is this going to work with my schedule? Just one small thing. Taking advantage of a clean slate. So this is why January is so powerful for habit formation, or it can be, because it is a new year. The phrase new year, new you. It's a clean slate. So there's many opportunities for clean slates within the year. There are new months, right? There are new seasons. There are new quarters. Maybe you get a new dog, or you have a new child, or you're in a new relationship, or you have a new job, or you move to a new house. All of these new things are opportunities to create new habits. Take advantage of those. There's very often people that can also shed old habits, right? Maybe you always had an unhealthy habit at your last job. Going into this new job, that unhealthy habit might completely fall out the window, which is a great thing. Make healthy strategies convenient. So this is really helpful as well. You'll see in the picture here that this person it looks like they're preparing dinner, but this could be chopping up vegetables. I don't know about you, but I often buy, especially when they're on sale, chopped up fruit and vegetables, because for me, convenience is key. I don't want to have to cut up all the carrots and cut up all the broccoli and whatever else it might be. If I can have it all ready to go, or if I can batch prep that healthy food so I can just grab it out of the fridge and it's not a big to do every time I want to eat healthy, that can be tremendously helpful. There's a lot of, health advocates that will say, don't put your fruits and vegetables in the fruit and vegetables drawers because it's not convenient to pull them out. Have them out and put your snacks in the drawers so that the snacks are less convenient, because that is another strategy that you can use, is to make unhealthy strategies inconvenient, unhealthy habits, really making unhealthy habits inconvenient. So, for example, you can put your phone in another room so that you're not checking your phone. Or you make the rule that you only, when you're checking your phone, you can only do it standing up, right? You can't sit down on the couch and, scroll through your phone. Or, you put the snacks. Well, first of all, don't even bring them into the house. That's inconvenient. But, put your snacks on a high shelf so that you can't reach them, or you have to go to the pantry and pull them out and put them in a bowl to eat them. That's the other thing about making healthy habits convenient. I mentioned the yoga studio. You do want to find a studio that is close to your work or close to home. You're going to be much more likely to do it, which is why, of course, I have an in-home gym because it's the most convenient. And then pairing. This is a very, very well researched and well supported strategy for habit formation. If you have something you do every single day already, pair a new habit with that strategy. Or if there's something you really like to do, maybe you have a show that you absolutely love, like a reality show, the Housewives of wherever. Maybe you only watch that show while you are walking on the treadmill, or you only listen to your favorite podcast while you're out walking the dog. It's kind of like you're getting, double bang for your buck. So it's this reward and this encouragement to be able to do that habit. Now, I talked about strategies for making a personalized burnout prevention plan. And again, there are so many more habit forming strategies than that. And we get into a lot of those strategies in our online program, From Burnout to Balance. Here's what I will say to you if you're looking to create a burnout prevention plan for 2026. Number one, if you know that you have energy draining habits in your life, scrolling, getting sucked into the couch, as some of my coaching clients will say, binge watching, online shopping, whatever it might be, things that drain you, you know that they're taking you away from healthy habit formation. How can you make those less convenient? Do you need to remove apps from your phone? What strategies can you do? And then what habits do you want to replace those with? What do you want to begin? Then you set those SMART goals, those specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals, and you track your progress. Maybe this is something you try for a month. I personally love the idea of dry January or frugal February if you want to, limit your spending, these different goals and themes that you can try for a good, 4-week period. And maybe then that becomes a habit, right? Or maybe, again, you choose to do it for a season or the entirety of the year. But that is what you need to do when it comes to making a plan. Again, when it comes to making habits stick in general, if I can leave you with just a few points, you do want to just focus on one habit at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't think I'm going to exercise and I'm going to change my diet and I'm going to meditate every day and. It's going to feel like overwhelm. It's going to feel like too much for most of us, okay? One small thing at a time. And again, if you can anchor that new habit to an existing routine. I remember years ago when I started meditating in the mornings, every morning I would boil water and I would have either tea or hot water with lemon. And every morning I started by just sitting in meditation while the water was boiling. I boiled that water every morning. So rather than standing there staring at my phone while the water was boiling, I sat on the couch and I closed my eyes and I focused on my breath. Okay. Using cues and reminders can be helpful. So this is where vision boards and post-it notes and other things can be helpful. And again, celebrate your small wins. If you get through 3 days in a row or a week in a row, this is why Don't Break the Chain is so helpful for so many people. Celebrate it. I'm a big fan of Peloton. And of course, that's where they're really emphasize, your 50 classes, your 100 classes. Those are big wins. Find ways to celebrate that. That is going to reinforce your habit as well. So again, if I can leave you with next steps, I urge you to think about one habit that you want to implement before the end of this week, some sort of low-hanging fruit. If you can identify already there's going to be obstacles or things that trigger an unhealthy habit, plan for those, recognize those. Very often the research shows that it takes just 5 to 10 minutes of distraction to get you away from doing an unhealthy habit. So if you're in the habit of doing one thing and you see that wanting to happen, just go for a walk around the block or do something just even for a few minutes. And that might be all it takes to get over that impulse that you're having. And again, reviewing and adjusting on a regular basis. If you start a habit and it is not resonating with you, let it go. You don't have to do everything. Not everybody, likes meditation. Not everybody needs to practice yoga. You want to do what works for you. That consistency, again, is better than productivity, right? Progress over perfection. And then again, all of this in the name of boosting your long-term health and well-being. Now, again, there is the expectation. I love this quote, I should say, by Naomi Rachel Remen, and that is that the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. So Naomi Rachel Remen is a physician, a human physician who speaks on burnout prevention among human healthcare professionals. And the sentiment really is that we recognize that we are prone to burnout in our profession. I talked about a lot of those work-related factors. So we do want to do everything that we can individually to help buffer that. Now, I fully recognize at the end of the day that you can do all the self-care strategies and burnout prevention, personal strategies in the world. And if you work in an unhealthy environment, it doesn't matter. Systems factors and organizational factors are always going to override personal factors. However, if you can do everything you can to help yourself, that is going to improve your chances of being able to sustain yourself in this profession long term. Okay, so not wanting to put it all on the individual, but wanting to recognize that we do have some power over ourselves. So that's where the program comes in. Okay. So our From Burnout to Balance program is a program that we have been running since 2021, highly, highly effective and sought after program that is specific to promoting burnout prevention and burnout recovery among veterinary professionals. In past years, we have run this program over an 8-week period, and we found it to be a lot for people to commit to with weekly content and weekly webinars and so on. So this year we have opted to stretch it over a 4-month period. We will be running the program between March and June of 2026. And if you click on the QR code, you will see more information. We do cover many topics in the program, including habit formation, as well as burnout, compassion, fatigue, moral stress, and those workplace stressors. We dive deeper into wellness and self-care and how to implement work-life separation. We talk about sleep hygiene as well. Mindfulness and meditation is a whole module, as well as perfectionism, self-compassion, and coping with mistakes and difficult situations at work. So again, a few logistics if you are interested. The structure is that there are emails that will be sent every other Monday on the module of topic with self-directed exercises, reflections, and action steps. The webinars are held on Wednesdays, but don't worry if Wednesday is not a good day for you. Everything is recorded, and there is peer support outside of the session. So everybody is in an accountability group that is linked up via WhatsApp. We also have group coaching and the option for one-on-one coaching. And of course, this program is certified for RACE for 10 hours in total. So again, there is lots to take away from this program, and there's many, many great testimonials that have been voiced by individuals who have taken the program. I've had managers, specialists, veterinarians, technicians, practice owners, the whole gamut have taken the program, and they've all had very, very, very positive benefits. So highly recommend that you check this out. And if not for you, maybe for somebody on your team or somebody you work with who you feel would benefit, because there are CE credits tied to it. Hopefully individuals can use their CE funds to address that as well. So key takeaways for today, and then I'm going to get to the questions. I know that there's some questions as well in the Q&A. Burnout prevention is built through small, consistent daily habits, not willpower. We cannot will ourselves away from burnout. So recognizing and understanding how habits work does make change easier and more sustainable. Even replacing one unhealthy habit at a time can lead to a lot of progress. I know for me, the first thing that I opted to get rid of was my social media scrolling because that was impacting me on so many levels. It all begins with self-awareness, right? That's always the first step. And then these tiny changes, when practiced consistently, can have this big impact over time. And you need to make a plan that's going to work for you. My plan won't work for you. Someone else's plan won't work. It has to be resonant with you. And again, that's where a coach and a program can help and be so beneficial. And I am here to help all of you, of course, have long and sustainable and enjoyable careers. So that's the goal at the end of the day. If you are looking for a free resource for yourself or something to share with your team, we have so many resources at Reviving Veterinary Medicine. This is a handout with 10 tools to tackle burnout and achieve balance. So that is available to anybody. You just need to sign up for our newsletter list, but that is available. So please take advantage of that as well. And I write a lot about my journey in burnout in my new book, A Compassionate Calling, what it really means to be a veterinarian. This is a book that you can read with your practice team as a group. I have book club questions. You can read it on your own. You can gift it to your partner if they still, 20 years into your marriage, have no idea what you do as a veterinary professional. This book is for everybody who's interested in learning more about the profession. And of course, I would be remiss not to mention our podcast. Reviving Vet Med is going strong. We're up to 82 episodes, I believe. I think we just had one released today, and we focus specifically on topics affecting the veterinary profession when it comes to mental health and well-being. So if you like podcasts, that's another one that you want to add to your list. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And I know Jamie has flagged a question for me, which I am opening up just now. There's a couple of questions here. Okay, so I have a first question from Teresa. Teresa asked, do you have tips for work-life separation for managers? I find this one of the things I can't seem to set a boundary. This is one of the things I can't seem to set a boundary with my team. I just can't turn work off at the end of the day because there will always be something, someone calling in sick, needing help with balancing the day end, etc. Teresa, I feel for you. As somebody who's worked in a leadership role for most of my career, even as a specialist on call, how do you have work-life balance when you're on call? And as a manager, you're on call, right? You are the person that is often going to be reached out to during these different scenarios that you mentioned, whether it's balancing at the end of the day or a call out. What I will say to you is that the boundary with the team is really the communication of how and when you need to be contacted. And I've done a lot of leadership trainings over the years, and I can tell you that your experience is not unique. So many managers, they deal with this. They deal with getting call out texts at 2 o'clock in the morning or, whatever it might be. And so the strategy that I recommend is to be very clear about when and how it's appropriate to be contacted. So using the example of call outs, right? Is a call out a situation where you actually need someone to phone you and have a conversation with you over the phone? Hey, I'm sick. This is what's happening. I can't come in today, to verify that. Or is a text message okay? Or is it an email? And is there a certain time frame that in which you need to be contacted? So that is one strategy. For other things, obviously, sometimes, balancing day end, or let's say there's an emergency situation that goes down to the hospital. Again, if it is an emergency, what does that look like? That needs to be a phone call so that you're not feeling like you have to constantly check your phone or be bombarded with notifications. And maybe you're getting text notifications that don't need to be texts. They're not urgent. Could those notifications be sent to you in an email so that, again, it's not constant bombardment outside of hours? At the end of the day, one of my answers to you as well is if you can share the load of the on-call with somebody, I recommend that you do that. So whether that's the practice owner, whether it's a regional manager, if you work in a corporate setting, whether it is a team lead or team leads that can also help shoulder the load of those call outs or some of these other situations, because it is impossible and not sustainable for one human to be on call 24/7, 365. there is no work-life separation at that point. Okay. So thinking it through, again, it's not an easy answer. It's a great question, and there are solutions, and I'm happy to unpack that with you offline if that would be helpful. But I love the question. Sarah asked the question. Yeah, so Sarah, thank you. Sarah signed up for our program starting in March and opted for the payment plan, which is an option for everybody. Will I get some sort of notice when I need to make another payment? Sarah, I'm going to have Jamie circle back with you because I actually believe, I want to say that it is an automatic payment that happens, but I could be wrong on that. So I'll have Jamie connect with you separately to this, and we'll make sure that we circle back with you so that you know when that is needed. So thank you for asking. Okay, those are all the questions that I see. I'm happy for anybody to reach out to me specifically if you have questions about the content that I've shared, if you got questions about reviving veterinary medicine and the other things that we provide. Happy for you to reach out. Would love to answer any questions about the program From Burnout to Balance as well. Early bird registration does end tomorrow. That gives you $200 off program registration. After that, it is open until the middle of February. So just letting you know, for that little bit of cost savings, we recommend that you do register sooner than later. And our non-veterinarian team members, namely our vet techs and vet assistants, they also have a discount. So please make sure that you take advantage of that discount code as well. That is it for our time together today. I'm going to open up my moderator notes to make sure I don't forget anything. Again, those of you who stayed with us, thank you everybody for being here. You will be eligible for CE credit. Jamie will put together those CE certificates and we'll email them to you. Please check your junk folders if you have not received a certificate within the week. Please do email us and let us know, but that will come to you via email. If you liked this webinar and you want to share it with your team or you want to share it with a friend, all of our content is free. Everything is on YouTube. So if you go to our YouTube channel at Reviving Vet Med, you can subscribe. You'll get notifications when new content drops. The webinar will be uploaded within the week. So again, share this with your team. Watch it as a lunch and learn. Do whatever you can. We want this content to be available to as many people as possible. Questions, wanting to learn more about upcoming events, please subscribe to our newsletter that comes out regularly. Otherwise, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for your comments. I'm very excited that so many of you were able to join us tonight, and I know that hundreds more will be watching the recording. So we really appreciate you. We are really dedicated to this community, and I hope that you take care, you stay well, and we hope to see you at our next event. We will have our next event as a panel discussion on January 21st. That's next Wednesday. Here in Canada, that is Bell Let's Talk Day. And that is a day for mental health awareness and conversation, and something I'm deeply passionate about. So I will be hosting a panel discussion with 3 individuals who are all advocates and veterinary professionals who have lived and breathed this space. And we're going to be unpacking why it's so hard for veterinary professionals to engage in help seeking. So please watch for that. It will be during the day on January 21st, and we'll have more information, of course, on socials and coming to you as well in the newsletter. So that's it. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much once again, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.